Hello and welcome. And I hope you're all at the right webcast. For those of you who are thinking of joining the Curing Body Dysmorphia conference, I have to disappoint you. We're going to be talking about a completely different CBDC, and that will be the central bank digital currencies. My name is Joe Lynam, and for many, many years, almost 20 years, I've been with the BBC. I present a program on the World Service called The Newsroom. And for many years, I was a business and economics correspondent when I first heard about blockchain and when I first interviewed one of our panelists today. We're going to answer 4 key questions today, I hope. Well, we'll at least have a stab at answering them. What are central bank digital currencies? Which countries are currently looking at CBDCs? How this could impact payments and businesses, and finally, the future of money, no less. And with us, we have 3 authors, 3 experts, and 3 very clever people who will hopefully enlighten us over the next 40 or so minutes. We have the authors of the Executive Guide to Blockchain. I have it under my pillow every single night in case I can't get to sleep. I'm kidding. Maria G Vigliotti and Haydn Jones. Give us a big wave, say hello so you can signal that you are Maria and Haydn, blah, blah, blah. Very good. And the author of The Currency Cold War, Dave Birch. Give us a wave.
Hi, guys.
Dave, as you can see, is broadcasting from outside his front door, which is amazing. There's no wind, no traffic, no screaming kids, no bin men. Well done, Dave, on that one.
I love lockdown.
I'm going to ask you all out there in the ether to prepare your questions to put to our panels. We're going to be talking about digital currencies and some of the geopolitical stuff surrounded about the adoption of geopolitical. We may mention blockchain. We may even mention the other B word, and that's not Brexit, by the way. So get your questions ready. Please have a look at the Q&A on the bottom right of your screen and submit your questions. Start submitting them now, so I can put them to our expert panelists in the course of the next 40 minutes or so. Remember, as they say in Scotland, shy bairns get nae sweets. So if you don't ask your question, you won't get your answer. So I'm going to start with Dave Birch, please, who is the author of The Currency Cold War and the go-to guy for journalists when it comes to digital currencies. Let's start with an easy one. What are CBDCs? Dave?
Well, CBDC, central bank digital currency, is simply the idea that the notes and coins that are in your pocket will be replaced by an electronic equivalent. Now, for many people, that might seem a little bit odd because, especially if you live in London, you don't use money anyway. Everybody uses debit cards and mobile phones. But that's electronic money. And the crucial point about central bank digital currency is that it's electronic cash. And the difference between money and cash is that money, electronic money, lives in bank accounts. You know, I can use Ping It to send money from my account to your account. I can use a check to send money from my account to your account. I can use my credit card round the corner at Waitrose to send money from my bank account to Waitrose's bank account. That's electronic money. That's not a replacement for the £5 note that's in my pocket. Actually, there hasn't been a £5 note in my pocket for some time, but you get the general point. The £5 note goes from my pocket to your pocket. It doesn't go through banks and accounts. So a central bank digital currency is a replacement for physical currency. It's electronic cash that lives in, metaphorically, my pocket, but actually my mobile phone, my car, my PC, my watch, hat, badge, you know, whatever I can store it in. But the crucial point is it's like real money. It's backed by the Bank of England in our example. I can hand it directly to you. It doesn't need to go through bank accounts. And its value is guaranteed, insofar as the value of sterling is guaranteed, by the full faith and credit of the United Kingdom, not some magic internet money that some kids have made up.
Okay. Now, you mentioned Bank of England. I'm going to go to a guy who worked for the Bank of England for quite a few years. Haydn Jones, the author of The Executive Guide to Blockchain. Tell us about what the Bank of England have been doing about digital currencies and how relevant that is for our discussion today, please, Haydn.
So the bank issued a consultation or a discussion document in March to essentially what they do is they go out to the marketplace, they capture input from the marketplace. It's a very effective way of getting input from a whole range of different parties with respect to their position. What should a position be on central bank digital currency? So the bank issued a discussion document in March. A whole bunch of people responded. So the response date, the submission date closed on the 12th of June. And an interesting thing about that is the bank have effectively sought view on essentially 4 areas. So the impact of central bank digital currencies on payments, the impact on monetary, economic, financial stability, what it means from a technical perspective, because, and again, we've not really got into the sort of blockchain and distributed ledger dimension, but we can have a centralized approach for CBDCs, or we can have a decentralized approach. So the bank was seeking input on whether it should be centralized, decentralized from a technical perspective, and then from an operational perspective, what does the input look like there? What's the responses perspectives in terms of how it would impact the economy more generally from an operational perspective. So the bank have been out there looking for input from members of the general public, essentially all the way through up to large technology companies in terms of what they should be thinking about from central bank digital currency perspective.
Now, I love your soft focus background, Haydn. I think that's really lovely. You're obviously aiming for that 1950s kind of romantic novel look, which is really lovely. I like it.
I need a haircut, you see. That's the thing, you see. I'm not been to the
some of us would kill for your bushy hair. That's a completely another discussion. We'll take that offline. Maria, please. Do you need blockchain technology to deploy CBDCs?
Hi, Joe. Thank you very much for the question. Rather than giving straight the answer, I think it's important that we think about what is the remit of a central bank typically. So a central bank has the role of guard the value of money, and typically they do so by managing in one way or another the supply of money and to ensure the financial stabilities. And that is in many ways making sure that the payment system that actually fuels and on which our economy and digital economy is based function at all the time. We can imagine that if payment systems stop working, the economy would take a huge hit. So then we can rephrase the question in terms of could we use or should we use blockchain or distributed ledger technology to power the central bank digital currency? And the answer, it is effectively probably not, and I would like to explain why. First of all, if we think about models, I mean, there are different models of blockchain out there, and if we think about cryptocurrencies that have brought to some extent to the attention of everybody the possibility for people to create new tokens or currency. I'm hesitant to say money because those instruments are not really money. So going back to would we use a technology such as Bitcoin for a central bank? The central banks wants to keep a very good control on the issuance of money. So it's very unlikely that a model like Bitcoin, where you have miners who get paid to produce new coins, would be acceptable for the central bank. The issuance of money would be a way to control the value of the money. One of the other issue that it is discussed also in the paper by the Bank of England is scalability. That is to some extent a red herring, because there are blockchains that are very scalable. Beyond Bitcoin, there are plenty of blockchains that are very scalable. So scalability is not the real issue why distributed ledger technology cannot be used. But the reality is that for the purpose of ensuring financial stability and guard the value of money, standard solution based on good and clever cryptography and central database would work very well for the remit of a central bank. So I'm not saying that distributed ledger technology will not be used, but I'm saying that it's very unlikely.
Okay, Maria, just go to some of the Q&A, and I see that Dave has very kindly answered some of the questions. Thank you, Dave. That's an extra tenner for you for doing that. Thank you for cracking on with that. There are a few open questions, and I'm going to put them, and I'm going to have a look at them and put them. I won't be able to put all the questions to the panel because there's quite a few. Anish Sangvi has said, can CBDCs be used for facilitating cross-border payments? I will be putting that to Dave. Anthony Parker, have stable coins stolen a march on any CBDCs, and will they offer competition to CBDCs? We have a question from Nasser Al-Teker. How will the CBDCs affect the role of banks, both traditional and digital? Dave, do you want to tackle that one for, can CBDCs be used for facilitating cross-border payments, from Anish? And you might want to make reference to what the Chinese are doing, Dave.
I think that's a very important, it's a good question, but it's also a very important question, because I think one thing to understand is that the construction of CBDCs doesn't happen in a kind of economic and political vacuum. It isn't just about, you know, in the case of the UK, it isn't just about the Bank of England trying to improve the efficiency of the UK and boost the UK economy. By the way, the Bank of England's original consultation research paper on CBDCs said that, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think they said if a third of the money in circulation is replaced, the notes and coins are replaced by CBDC, that's a GDP boost of around 4%, and we really need those boosts. But I think it's not just about domestic.
4% of Britain's entire GDP.
Yeah.
If we took out cash.
For two reasons, really. So one is people don't realize how much money cash costs, because it's a diffuse cost. They don't see it, but you know, someone has to pay to fill up ATMs and run them and drive security vans around and have cash tills and all this sort of thing. That's part of it. But the main part of the Bank of England's argument, which I agree with, by the way, was that because the way you would build a digital currency would be in a modern way, with application programming interfaces and all this kind of thing, the opportunity for innovation and embedding transactions into more interesting products and services would lead to great innovation. But the point about cross-border, I think, is important. So it isn't just about improving our economy. The reason I want the Bank of England to construct a fantastic digital sterling isn't just because make life easier for me. I don't use cash anyway. It's also about soft power. It's about sterling being used around the world, being trusted, being the best currency because it offers, I don't know, whatever it needs to offer, privacy, great functionality, speed, you know, whatever.
Money back guarantee?
Money back guarantees. It's not just about the domestic use. And you alluded to one of the most important things going on in the world at the moment, Joe, which is the launch of China's digital currency. Well, I mean, while we're still talking about it, I mean, I'm sure Haydn will agree, there was something slightly ironic about the US Treasury printing and mailing out subsidy checks to people, like some Little House on the Prairie kind of thing, in the same week that the Chinese were beta testing digital currency in 4 cities. The ramifications of that, though, are to do with not the Chinese domestic market. It's all about the Belt and Road Initiative. It's about making it easier to trade and do business with China around the world. So the cross-border point is a really important point.
Haydn, I'm going to bring you in. It's interesting that you mentioned the checks being mailed out. A story in the New York Times saying that something like $4 billion were posted to dead people over the last 2 months by the Federal Reserve to get the checks going. Haydn, can I pass on a question from John or JN George? Do you think that as per traditional cash usage to pay illegal things, CBDC will be used for illegal activities as well?
That's a really great question. So yeah, if you look at what we currently have, we've got a whole series of sort of guardrails that sit around money. Okay, so we have AML, so anti-money laundering, we've got KYC requirements, we've got counter-terrorism funding, checks that we do. We've got sanctions that apply to countries. So if you've ever worked in a financial institution, and you're dealing with large amounts of money, large payments that are sent from your own legal entity to some other legal entity, there's a whole series of checks that you go through to make sure that the receiving party is legitimate, and or the fact that you've received money from some other entity, that there is some trusted nature associated with the receipts of those funds. Now, the problem we've got, so Bitcoin really is very clever, and that's the first time we've used that B word, in that the genie's out of the lamp in many ways, because we've created this sort of free form of really solid, cryptographically solid store of value that we can send to anybody anywhere in the world with relative ease, without identifying who it's come from or who it's going to, because it can be anonymized. So the way we clean up Bitcoin and digital currencies more generally is we put guardrails around them. And what we do is we have an on-ramp in terms of the parties that are sending funds in, and we have an off-ramp so that we go from a digital currency to a fiat currency. We're comfortable that actually the destination of that those funds again is legitimate, and it's all clean, and there's all sorts of lovely hygiene around that. So will CBDCs provide for an equivalent level of security? Are they going to end up being used for the illegal activities? Well, it's if you look at the perimeters, those boundary fences that we've already got around traditional fiat, I think it's reasonably certain that the central banks will erect exactly the same kind of barriers around the use of CBDC. So there'll be an on-ramp in terms of who are the individuals, who are the parties who are entering this protocol. They want to move funds, and where is this money going to when it moves out of that platform? So I think it's a certainty. We'll create perimeters. It will be very difficult to do anything questionable with that form of money.
Thank you, Haydn. Question from Maria Grazia from Massimo Carnellos. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. What's your preference as the CBDC model, synthetic or pure version? Would the first option unlock more space for small fintech companies, crowding out the big banks? He's from the Italian embassy, no less.
Well,
your passport renewal is going to be up for grabs here.
So thank you to Massimo from the Italian embassy.
Grazie, Massimo.
So I guess the question is, will simply the Bank of England issue the CBDC, or will sort of allow also other companies to come in? And I think the real important question here is, again, what is the role of the central bank, not only nationally but also internationally, but also how the CBDC enables financial inclusion and supports the digital economy. So in the paper by the Bank of England, this question was posed, but never in terms of issuance, but simply in terms of we maintain the two-tier models that we have now as issuance of digital monies, central bank digital currency. So there will be a commercial aspect that would be given to the commercial bank, and then will be another sort of money that will be given to everybody. And this money, as David said, will contain some API, and that will allow fintech to create innovative product, enable financial inclusion, probably be the building block for cross-border payments, and so on and so forth, while the bank keeps a very strong control on the issuance of money. So that I would say, in that respect, that is pure and not quite synthetic. And that I would guess it's really the role where many central banks will want to go. I mean, if we read the questions posed by the central bank, the Bank of England paper on the issuance of central bank digital currency, one of the real questions, that was posed is isn't that in the remit of the central bank to prevent private money to come around and effectively creating some kind of financial instability? So I would reframe that the bank will want to keep a very strong hold of the issuance of money, and use the financial opportunity with this digital currency, not only to improve the domestic economy, but also to exercise somehow some power in the international arena.
Thank you very much, Maria. And Dave, you've been cracking on. You've answered 14 questions nearly. Well, actually, I've answered one or two by simply saying done. But you've actually answered some of the questions. So I appreciate that.
You can go now. You can go now.
We can go now. Actually, Haydn, you need to pick up the baton there. Can I ask Dave a question about the impact of COVID-19 and the acceleration of digital change that we're going to see in relation to central bank digital currencies, potentially in relation to blockchain as well? Can we take it as given that the stuff that was on the shelf, the kind of the bleeding edge stuff, is going to become a lot more actioned in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say the virus is accelerating strategies. It's not changing them. But in this particular case, it's interesting actually because here the newspaper, and it's true, the newspapers say, well, the virus is causing a transition to contactless, and everybody's using contactless for everything, and contactless is the future, which of course is partly true. But the numbers don't lie. I mean, I just bought an ice cream earlier on using contactless. But I think the big picture is not the transaction to contactless, but the transaction to contact free. You know, if you look at the Asian markets where they've already been through SARS and so on, those are markets where everything has gone over to the apps, everything has gone over to, you know, the QR codes, and nobody touches anything. And if you want the bumper sticker version of this, it's we're going to app and pay, not tap and pay. So while it's being talked about as accelerating the transition to contactless, which is true because that's what we have now, what it's really accelerating is a transaction away from any kind of contact. And that has really big implications. I actually think quite good implications. If you just think about it, I'll give you a super stupid, simple example. When I walk into Waitrose to buy something,
I hope everyone has noticed that he goes to Waitrose and not Lidl.
I mean, sorry. I mean, so when I walk into Waitrose to buy something, the first time that Waitrose know anything about me is when I tap to check out. And the Asian version of this is I scan a QR when I go in, I get my special offers on my phone. They know it's me. Welcome back, Dave. They can optimize the products, the services for me. You know, the idea that you check in rather than check out. So it's right to say that COVID is accelerating that transition. But in my opinion, I think it's a bit short-sighted to see it as a transition to contactless. What it really is a transition to contact-free.
Maria, question from Anonymous. They're always the best ones, I think. CBDC is meant for financial inclusion, but for illegal immigrants or people with no IDs, it will be exclusion and maybe total elimination. What do you think, Maria?
So it is a problem for many society. Not, in the Western society, we don't have many people without an identity, and it is true that immigrants might have a problem with that. And this is one of the reasons why central bank is there. All central banks, certainly in Europe, probably in Asia, as we have discussed, it's a slightly different situation. Are a little bit reluctant to completely eliminate cash because ultimately cash enables some form of easy financial inclusion. What I would like to say about that is that the identity of the future will not be simply the identity that we have now, whereby I'm a recognized citizen because I've been living in the UK, I'm Italian, I have a passport, and so on and so forth. And with a little bit of luck, given that there are already technical means to enable when people come in to actually be somehow registered and to possibly have a different status, I think there are opportunities to create a central bank digital currencies where also people who are not necessarily, you know, they have come here with different reasons, or they don't have what would be an ordinary documentation. If you either were born here, they would be able to use central bank digital currency. What we need to think about is actually the other way around, which is about AML. People like to think about cryptocurrency as a vehicle for dirty money.
Money laundering, just in case there's anyone out there who's not sure what AML is.
Yes, or for dirty money or for money laundering or for financing terrorism. But actually, if we look at the numbers today, a large part and most of the money laundering happens through financial institutions. And financial institutions spend billions of pounds to prevent that, and somehow it doesn't work. So the idea that you can think the other way around, a robust identity check with central bank digital currency could actually prevent money laundering and actually enable immigrants to have an identity and to have financially inclusive, to be financially inclusive, because very often immigrants come here with the intention to work, and actually they are honest people and should be allowed to enter into the financial system. And the other thing I would like to say is that financial digital currency could reduce the cost of financial services, and hence be more approachable to people with very low incomes, which at the moment it's not. Banks prefer to have people with a certain level of income to provide very good credit and very good financial instruments.
Can I just add a little thing to that, Joe?
Sure, go ahead.
Because I think Maria is highlighting a separate but very, very important problem, which is the issue of financial inclusion.
Yes.
It really isn't much to do with the money. It's to do with the identity. The reason why people can't get into the system is because they don't have identities. And if we really want to help people in emerging economies, you know, that would be the way to do it. Maybe not conventional identities like ours, you know, passports and things. I mean, there's a lot to be said for using transaction histories as a substitute for conventional kinds of identities, but it's a problem that really does need to be tackled. It's just not a CBDC problem.
No, exactly. Okay. Exactly. No, I would like to say that in a sense, perhaps I didn't highlight at the point, but when I said we need a different kind of identity, and hopefully this will come because we have the opportunity, I would like to emphasize that both I and Dave are exactly on the same page. And technically it is possible to provide other kinds of identity. There are other kinds of social and political issues around that.
Haydn, apart from China, which major current economies will be the first to adopt CBDC seriously? That's a question from Keith Bear.
So that is, well, I suppose if I was a betting man, which I'm not, but it's, I mean, I'd back the United Kingdom. I would back the United Kingdom. I think as part of the discussions we had leading into this, you know, you think about, let's put aside for one moment your perspectives on whether you are pro or anti-Brexit, okay? But actually, if you think about it, and I think it's Anthony Parker that talks about, you know, have CBDC stolen a march on stablecoins, and we can get into that as well, because that's another important question. But I'd almost argue that the United Kingdom, you know, the bank have actually stolen a march globally, okay? I'd say that the Chinese and that Asian basin have right at the head of the pack. But the United Kingdom, we have deep capability. There's some real, you know, depth of horsepower, intellectual horsepower in the Bank of England. So I put money on the Bank of England, and the ability, you know, we can talk about whether the shackles have been released from leaving the European Union and all that kind of stuff. But you know, if we approach this on the basis that we'll have freedom, okay, we'll have, and I'm not going to express a view whether I'm pro or anti-Europe, but if we approach this on the basis that we actually have freedom to create a new form of store of value, which is programmable, that's going to be highly attractive, and without necessarily having the sort of the rigmarole of going through, you know, a member state form of governance to sort of define what this new form of value, this new store of value looks like. I think we're in a very, very strong position. So I'd put money on the United Kingdom.
I often hear South Korea's name mentioned, Haydn. Do you think that they're well placed? Because a lot of people say that they are using technology that we will be using in 5 or 10 years.
I mean, when I first got into Bitcoin properly on a full-time basis, blockchain, digital currencies, obviously then exposed to, you know, the operation of Bitcoin. I went to South Korea, and I can remember going to South Korea, and we were promoting a specific project, and we were sort of briefed that you know, you're going to have to do quite a bit of work in terms of explaining it. When you get there, and we discovered actually they weren't interested in the operational dimension, because they already knew all about it. So they're very much, you know, ahead of the pack there. And I think I did say that, you know, those Asian Basin countries, you know, they're very much ahead there. Yeah, so, you know, I think there is a good case for leadership there in South Korea.
Maria, a question from Anish Sangvi. China recently announced the intention of creating a regional stable coin consisting of China, Japan, South Korea, and Hong Kong. What are your thoughts around this? Also, is there a merit in the Bank of England creating a similar regional stable coin along with the EU on the same subject?
I think that it's a very interesting question, and I think it goes back to what we mentioned earlier about soft power, international software power. I would like to say actually international hard powers, because if we think about today, the role that the US is playing just by, you know, being able to stop people from settling the US dollars, to put sanction and hence prevent people from settling in the US dollars. I think what we see in the Asian market is an opportunity to actually create alternative currencies in which the world could potentially settle. If people don't trust directly China, there could be a sort of basket of currency where people could settle, or where the region can actually can settle together, and hence foster better commerce in the region. I think that maybe in the future, if the geopolitical situation changes, there could be a value in putting a sort of European central bank digital currency. The European Central Bank has put a lot of paper and has done quite a lot of studies around central bank digital currency. And I guess, you know, with Lagarde at the head, it's a possibility that this will move forward. But for a central bank to do that, there has to be a reason. Yeah. And I would say that, for example, there is a much greater opportunity that the Middle East can come up with some kind of basket of coins to enable the economy restarting. Because at the moment, the US sanctions are having a big impact on legitimate businesses.
That's a really good point. I'm going to go back to Dave Birch on the idea of using central bank digital currencies and technology as a rule to bypass the hegemony of the US dollar as a fiat currency. Dave, I know you have some thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, and not just me. I mean, the reason this was in my head is because Mark Carney, you know, when Mark Carney was the governor of the Bank of England not that long ago, he said we need some form of synthetic hegemonic currency, i.e. a stable coin of some kind. Actually, I hate the word. They're not really stable coins. They're digital currencies. And he said we need to deal with the destabilizing dominance of the US dollar. So the point is, America's friends, like the UK, can see all sorts of reasons why the settling of the majority of international transactions in US dollars is not a good thing. It made sense to organize the international monetary and financial system like that at the end of the Second World War, when America was, I think, a third of world trade or something like that. Now it's 8%, 9% or something. It doesn't make any sense. So even America's friends are concerned about this. But there's a much more worrying thought that I can introduce into the conversation, which is if people that we don't like are able to transact with impunity outside the international monetary and financial system, that could be very negative for us, which, you know, I'm not really making a political point. You know, whether you agree with America's ability to project soft power, sometimes on our behalf, through the financial system or not, the fact is it can. The Economist calls it financial carpet bombing, which I think is just a lovely phrase. So if you know, you're some country and you do something America doesn't like, they can turn you off. You know, they can just stop you trading. Now, the lesson that many countries would have drawn from that is not, oh, well, you know, we'll behave ourselves in future so that we can use. The lesson they would have drawn is, well, what if there was something a bit like money, but it wasn't run by America? That's the lesson they'll have learned from that. So the idea of central bank digital currencies from some parts of the world as a way around the current infrastructure is, you know, that's not a scare story. That's absolutely real.
And yet, do you know what we've seen in the last few weeks and months, lady and gents, is that if you decide to go against the Americans, for example, Huawei, the Americans get very cranky and very grumpy and threaten all sorts of things. Well, it depends on who's in the White House.
It's not only you know, the international financial system is going to change because of the pressures of these technologies, not just at that level. The fact is the decentralizing nature of these technologies. You know, we're talking about central banks as the people that can issue these, but the technology means basically anybody can issue it. So Maria's vision, I'm not just saying this because I'm English and she's European, but the idea that, you know, the European Central Bank could be an issuer of central bank. Yeah, well, yes, it could be an issuer, but so could the government of Catalonia. You know, so could Northern Italy. You know, so could Bavaria. I mean, you know, the idea that these currencies will only be issued by the existing central bank, looking slightly outdated nation state structure, that doesn't seem right to me either.
But David, we need to acknowledge that as technologists, that the technology can go only so far. I mean, the reality is that, of course, Catalonia can issue all the money they want, but somebody has to buy and to want it to get to Catalonia and use the money and be able to make an exchange. And frankly, you know, I would probably buy, it's far more likely that I will buy some kind of synthetic coin from Asia, because I'm going to travel there. It's a much bigger continent. I might have some business there, than going to Catalonia. So in this case, with all due respect, size matters, right? I mean, unless Catalonia becomes like Singapore, a superpower of knowledge and services and so on and so forth, which is of course possible. You know, the question is, yes, anybody can issue money, but what is the value of that money? If we look just, I mean, I don't think this is necessarily an example of what is going to come, but if you look at cryptocurrencies, right? When I entered into the market, there were about 3-4 cryptocurrencies. Then in the last 3 years, we have gone from 600 cryptocurrencies to over 5,000 cryptocurrencies. But if you look at the market cap, I mean, the last 4,000 are worthless effectively. Those are, you know, tokens. I could have issued some of my cards and say, there you go, guys. This is worth 1p, 2p. Please have it as you know.
If a future mayor of London, just passes a law that all property taxes in London, all rents and things, if property taxes in London have to be paid using London money, then London money will have a value. The fact that you don't use it in the shop doesn't matter. It's not important.
Okay, but we are talking about London money, not with all due respect, ups and downs money.
I'm just saying that central bank digital currency isn't just about, I mean, we're talking about it in the central bank context, but it's much more important than that.
Haydn, can I bring you in on this and ask about a question here from Jonathan George? Society will have to trust technologists as the solution and trust technology to be built around technologies. He's right though, isn't he? I mean, we are talking about something that's, you know, developing and is emerging, but the average person, you know, the Betty and Brighton and Steve in Sheffield, they're not going to know anything about this, and it's going to take them a while before they'll part with their fiat currency.
So, you know, let's see, society will have to trust the technologists as the solution will be built around the technology. So there's quite a few components to answer that question. I mean, I think the interesting way to go through it is to say Bitcoin is open source. So that means that anybody on this call, we can go and actually we can download the code, and we can, and this is, and Maria pointed to the fact there's over 5,000 codes. So that's 5,600 as of this afternoon, 5,618. Okay, and what people do is they download the Bitcoin source code, and they create things like, you know, the Margaret Thatcher coin, the Trump coin, all this kind of stuff. Now, what is a real positive about open source software is that it sits there for everybody to scrutinize. So all its flaws, its failings are there for people to exploit, but also strengthen, because, you know, Bitcoin is effectively a community project. Everybody goes in, they kind of tidy the code up, they iterate. And actually, as a protocol, it's got to a point that it's actually very, very strong, because on a daily basis, it's exposed to the threat posed to it by upwards 7 billion people who can download that code and they can try and hack it. So, for Steve in Sheffield and Betty in Brighton, I'm not going to sit here and explain, open source code principles to them, but I think I'd like to think, and I've used this analogy a couple of times, but I'd like to think that we'll get to a place with digital currencies that, we sit here now and we have the benefit of radio telecommunications. So radio waves are facilitating this whole call. We've got transmitters and receivers. Do we sit here and think about how radio works? Or do we sit here and think about the electromagnetic waves, the electrostatic waves, the way that we have transmitters and receivers? Not in the slightest. And radio's been around for 220 years. So Marconi invented it, and what Marconi did, he got rid of copper, okay? And he created this sort of magical framework whereby we can send information from A to B through the air, magically, through these things called radio waves. Now, does Steve in Sheffield and Betty in Brighton think about, this radio thing, well, I don't trust it, what is it all about? It's kind of seemingly magic. Well, they don't. And it's got 120 years worth of history behind it. So my suspicion is we'll get to a point that actually, we've kind of touched on this, but I think there's going to be a massive proliferation of the tokenization of utility in a general sense, because I've got a car, sits outside, I only drive it sort of once a week, but actually I can tokenize its utility. I can create the Haydn car token that people can then leverage. The code exists, I can do that. So
1985 Ford Fiesta, folks, if you want to tokenize that.
Yeah, it's £1 an hour. So it will get to a place that we can trust it, because it's got, there's mass adoption globally, and it just sits there and it will work, and it'll be buried deep down in the technical stack, and we just won't think about it on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, we're going to wind up shortly. I'm going to ask for a very quick kind of one-sentence answer to this. We'll start with Dave. I suspect the answer will be pretty brief. Within 5 years, will CBDCs be accepted or used widely? Within 5 years, Dave?
In China, certainly. In the US, quite possibly. In the UK, I'm with Haydn. I think the UK should make a digital sterling a priority for our, post-Brexit national narrative.
Maria, within 5 years, central bank digital currencies, widely accepted.
I mean, I think certainly in China and possibly in Asia, I totally agree with David, simply because, there are already, it's already happening. The US will follow because simply they want to they have to, there is no other choice there. It's simply, and Europe has to do something. I mean, I love the UK. I have been living here for very long. I would like to see the European Union to actually make, an assertion of power there. If they really want to, that's an opportunity to make really a big assertion of power, I would say.
Haydn, briefly. Yes or no, within 5 years?
I've nailed my colours to the mast on this one. So I'll turn the question on its head and I'll say, well, what's stopping us? And actually the thing that's stopping us, I would argue, is political will. And obviously there is an enormous amount going on, but, and again, I'm not going to come out either side of the political, fence, but if there's the political will to do it, I see no reason why it can't happen. And I think it will put Britain out there head and shoulders in terms of a new place to do and execute digital commerce.
Brilliant. On that note, we're going to wind things up. Remember, you could also buy The Executive Guide to Blockchain by Maria G Vigliotti and Haydn Jones, Amazon. And you can buy The Currency Cold War by David Birch, as opposed to Dave Birch, who I'm sure is a completely different expert out there. So to all of you, and thank you, we've responded apparently to 37 of your questions. Most of those responded to by David Birch. So thank you for your comments and your queries, and hopefully we're all a little bit wiser. I certainly am. So as they say in the Gary Shandling show, no flipping. Stay well. Stay well to all of you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. That was really fun.
Thank you.
Ciao. Have a good one.
Bye-bye. Bye.